And I believe we are live. Coffee with Frankie. It's another week. It's another Sunday. It's July 21st. It's a Sunday. It's coffee. This is the coffee. It's getting cold. And I am the Frankie. We're here on another Sunday, July 21st, 2024. We made it through another week, and we are on the verge of training camp. Training camp is actually coming. There's going to be a training camp. This long slog of an off season is finally coming to an end. We're going to have training camp, which means we're going to have training camp updates and who looks good and who looks bad and who looks terrible and who's gotten injured and who's going to be okay. And oh my God, that was a scare and all of these type of things. We are going to do that this week. We are going to have that this week. There will be all sorts of NFL news coming out. So this is the last show basically of the off season that we will do. And speaking of things that we will do, we need to take a look at the news. And so we need to take a look at what happened in Jet news and also what happened this week in the NFL, other types of news. So we will do a review of the news. Let's see. Okay, here's our little mind map, the Mind Meister. So let's see what is really going on this week in Jet news. All right, the first item up. Oops. What happened here? We don't want to do that. First item up is this one. Jets were interested in Steelers OC Arthur Smith this offseason. This is the first item. And this is according to Diana Rossini. According to, why is this popping up? According to Diana Rossini, Jets had conversations about bringing former Falcons head coach Arthur Smith on board as their offensive play caller this season. Well, they weren't going to bring him on board as the offensive play caller, so that's incorrect. They were thinking about bringing him on as some sort of a consultant. It says here, Smith elected to join the Steelers as their OC, and the Jets struck out in their attempt to land a senior offensive staff member. Not really to supersede Nathaniel Hackett, but to complement him. Now, this is an article by Diana Rossini. And so this is, one of the things we have to keep in mind with these media people is that, you have to understand the context of their reporting. Now, remember, Diana Rossini is the one who, she's basically the new Manish Mehta on the Jets beat. And so she is the one who will put together reports like this. And if you remember, she reported on that Zach Wilson reluctant to play story that everybody basically denied. And basically it was untrue, but she reported it anyway because of whatever the reason. So she's like, the new Manish Mehta. And then, of course, Aaron Rodgers came out and said he wasn't too happy with that reporting. And of course, as with all of the journalists, they all do the same thing, which is if you criticize them, then they remember that and they never forget it. And they will take any shot at you that they can over the years. And so, this kind of a story, which is just really the Jets, the story is really the Jets do due diligence and talk to a respected coach who was fired. He was fired from the Falcons. And of course, he was a candidate for the Jets head coach position back before they hired Robert Saleh. So they were just doing due diligence, as you do. And it's really a non-story. They talk to him, they feel him out. Let's see, maybe he wants to come on board, maybe he doesn't. Let's have a conversation. Let's keep up relations. But of course, Rossini looks at that and says, well, here's a way to take a subtle jab at Aaron Rodgers because he didn't like my reporting. False reporting about Zach Wilson reluctant to play. So I will take a little stab at him because, of course, he's close with Nathaniel Hackett. And so if you juxtapose these items that we're talking to Arthur Smith, he's an offensive coordinator type. Isn't that a jab at Nathaniel Hackett? And isn't that a little jab at Aaron Rodgers? So this is what Diana Rossini is doing, and we need to keep that in mind when we read her reporting. All right. Next news item. Jets humbled. Jets humbled. All right, let's see what this one's all about. From Jets Wire, NFL reporter tells Colin Cowherd that the Jets have been humbled. All right. Again, Diana Rossini. Hey. So once again, Rossini is on the scene, and she says that we've been humbled. Here's the complete takeaway from Rossini. They were all in last year, and we know what happened. Didn't work out. The Jets have done an incredible job of just quieting the noise. Remember, last year we were going bonkers, right? So the media was going bonkers. So somehow the media, sort of having a feeding frenzy on the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and the big trade, and boy, they're going to do good this year and all that. Somehow that reflects on the Jets. I was on your show every other day talking about the Jets, right? So she was on there every other day. By who decided to put her on there? The Jets? No. Colin Clownherd did. And they've learned that is the one thing. That's my biggest takeaway from the offseason. If in my conversation with coaches, with players, now Rossini is also the one who, after the season, along with Zach Rosenblatt, also just as bad, who was talking about all of the negative things that were going on in the Jets building. And they talked to coaches and players for sure. And those coaches and players were people that we had let go. So they were disgruntled. They were disgruntled people. That's who they were. And so she reports, technically, honestly, that she talked to coaches, she talked to players. Yeah, she did. But they're players and coaches with axes to grind. She talks to Rex Hogan. She talks to Michael Carter. She talks to Adrian Amos. She talks to all the people that we let go. Coach Embry, who's now in New England. Of course, those people are going to say bad things. We let them go. They're not going to be too happy. So in a sense, she can still honestly say that she's talked to these people, but it's not really honest reporting because these are disgruntled employees. And so the same thing applies here. What coaches and what players did you talk to? The ones we let go? Again, who did you talk to? But of course, in journalism, you're not allowed to say who you talked to, so you never have to reveal your sources. You should probably talk to Zach Azzani. Here's Zach Azzani right here. This is our former wide receiver coach. We let him go. Now he's with the Steelers. You should probably talk to Zach. He's probably not too happy that we let him go. He's got some negative things to say. Of course, anybody you let go is going to have negative things to say. And so there you go. But this is what we have to keep in mind when we have journalists like this, and especially poor ones at that. All right. So, but I guess overall, if we've been humbled, I don't know what that means. Hopefully, don't forget we had Hard Knocks and all these things going on, and Rodgers had just gotten here, so it was a brand new story. And, Connor's writing a book about Aaron Rodgers, so he had to be there. It was all the media. It was basically media driven. So now we don't have as much media, so we quieted it down by not having Hard Knocks there. Oh, congratulations. Next news. The West Coast offense. The West Coast offense jargon. So let's see what this is all about. All right, so this comes from Touchdown Miami. Touchdown Miami. This is a Substack. I would recommend checking out Substack, and you may want to check out Kyle Krabs. Even though he writes about the Dolphins, he is a knowledgeable football person and writes really well. And one of the reasons we're going to talk about this is because Mike McDaniel is the head coach of the Dolphins. He comes from the Shanahan tree, and the Shanahan tree is also associated with Nathaniel Hackett through Paul Hackett and Mike Holmgren and Mike, the coach of the Cowboys, Big Mike over there. So all of these things are related. So we're going to take a lesson from Touchdown Miami by Kyle Krabs and see if we can apply it to the Jets because it applies. Now he's talking about jargon here, and ESPN's Pablo Torre said something about uh, uh, jargon. All we just heard was just a bunch of jargon that 99% of the people have no idea what it means at all, and they were talking about some offensive concepts, and that's annoying. So Pablo was annoyed by that. So he said, all right. Kyle Krabs said, all right, well, let's take a look at what they're talking about. And it was from this Hard Knocks, the offseason Hard Knocks with the Giants, where the Giants coach was talking to Drake May, and they're talking about plays. And the reason why it's jargon to you and not to them is because this is what they do for a living. This is what they do every day. You think about a guy like Drake May, he's probably been a quarterback since he's 7 years old. They know what all this jargon means because they've been doing it for many, many years, including the coach, right? Gun Dolphin writes 72 Tundra float H angle. What does that mean? Well, you're not a quarterback and you don't you don't get it. It's jargon. It's telling the players what to do. And here's where in the scene they explain it, and in Hard Knocks they say Tundra stands for what, and what does float stand for. So all of these words have a meaning. They're telling players what to do on a play. For example, under routes are shallows. Under routes, say here's the line of scrimmage. Here's a wide receiver, and he goes over here. That's an under route. This would be an over route. So as soon as you understand the words, it becomes a lot easier. A flag route is essentially a corner route, means you're running toward the corner. H angle is coded for half back, running at an angle instead of flat. It's an unprecedented level of access to the holy grail of the pre-draft process and understanding all of these things. So what do we need to know about all this? What about this play? North right clamp, south fox, H top pass, 38, top Gumby, XP sweat. Now that's kind of complicated sounding. What the hell does this mean right here? Well, then he goes through it. Now, you do have to understand some things of a basic nature. Some things are run only, for example, versus MFO. What is MFO? Middle of the field open. So if you have no safeties here or two safeties where safeties are taken a side each, that's known as middle of the field open. If you have one safety in the middle of the field, that's middle of the field closed. So this is how these plays work versus middle of the field open. And there's two versions of this. If we're going to run it regular, or are we going to run the alert? So in this play, this is what we do if we don't call an alert. But if we do call an alert, this is what you do. And in the play call, we call it fly wide right clamp, P38 whiz, Z drift, alert Z sweat. So that gets called in the huddle. And then if the quarterback goes alert, 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 you know you're doing the alert. If he doesn't, then you're not doing the alert. You're doing this over here. And so this is important to understand because it is somewhat complicated, but it's not as complicated as you might think because the quarterback already knows all of this because they've been doing it. Now, you notice there's an 11 here and here. What does that mean? Well, this is for the personnel grouping that you're in as an offense. So in this particular play, you have 11 personnel. Now, if you don't understand personnel, that's something very basic that I think personally every football fan should know about. Personnels. Who's on the field? On any play, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 offensive linemen at least. Those 5 generally just stay on the field, plus the old quarterback. This number inside the circle means how many step drop they're going to do. 5-step drop, 7-step drop. So that means that's 6 people, right? 5 offensive linemen and the quarterback. New York Flight Jets Talk is here. Good to see you, buddy. We're just going over some plays here. And so there's 6 players on the field. That means there can only be 5 more, right? Because you can only have 11 people on the field. And if you try to put more than that on the field, they call a penalty. And if you put less, then you're at a disadvantage. So there's only 5 players left. So when you have 11 personnel, it's 1 running back and 1 tight end. That leaves only 3 other people who can be on the field, and those are going to be your wide receivers. So 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end means you're going to have 3 wide receivers. And those wide receivers are designated here by X, Z, and F. So this play is for 11 personnel. If you have 2 tight ends, it's going to be 12 personnel, and it might be different. Okay. So you see all of this going on, and we know certain things. Pass 38 top Gumby is the protection scheme and backfield run action. But one of the questions I have about this, here's what the play is called. North right clamp south, Fox H top pass 38 top Gumby XP sweat as an example. My question with this, and all West Coast offenses do this, they're very wordy. And my question is, why can't we simplify this? Because what this is really doing is telling everybody what they need to do, plus an alert at the end. But it's telling everybody what to do. This is what the halfback does. This is what the protection scheme is. Why can't we have a few code words where the code word means one thing to one group, the offensive line, the same code word means something to the X receiver, the same code word means something to the Z receiver, the same code word means something to the tight end, and the same code word means something to the running back? That would simplify things. But on the other hand, there's so many West Coast offenses, and they're all so wordy like this, and I certainly can't be the only person who's thought, maybe we should simplify this. So there must be some reason you can't do that, or that it's hard to do, because they don't. Otherwise, they would. So all of this being the case, you can kind of see why, just in terms of language and understanding the playbook, you need a smart quarterback to run a West Coast offense. This is sort of goal number 1. You need a high football IQ quarterback to run your West Coast offense. He doesn't need to have a gun for an arm. He doesn't need to be Michael Vick with the legs. But what he does need to be is very smart, because all this is just one play with an alert tied to it. And it's just, you may have 400 of these, and that's not even getting to the point where you're out of the huddle and now you have to make decisions, right? So you can kind of see why we've been in so much trouble the last few years. I think this illustrates why, for example, the 49ers, say, with Garoppolo and then Purdy, and Tua with the Dolphins have been much more successful the last few years. Because those quarterbacks were much better than our quarterbacks at understanding and executing all of this stuff. And in fact, I would say, given how complicated all this is, and here's another one. Here's how a shift works. But anyway, with how complicated all of this really is, it's kind of a miracle that we even won 7 games the last 2 years, considering who we had at quarterback. If you think about it, and then you factor in all the offensive line injuries, and it's miraculous we won 7 games. But here you have the fly is the shift. Okay, so the Y is going to shift. Wide right is base formation and strength. Wide right means that the Y, or the tight end, is going to be on the right, and the right side of the formation is going to be the strong side. Clamp is the adjustment for the Z receiver. That means he's going to clamp in. P38 whiz, pass 38 whiz is the protection call. Pass play, but the run action is emulating 38 whiz, which is a weak side away from the tight end, outside zone with split flow action by the tight end. So the tight end's going to go opposite of the flow. Z drift, the actual play concept. Alert Z sweat, the at the line of scrimmage adjusted play concept based on the coverage look. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with all of this, going through all of this to say, all of the people who are worried about Nathaniel Hackett and he's going to screw up our season and he's a total dum-dum. Frankie says, don't worry. Because now, this season, we got not one, not two, but really three, although one's a rookie, so maybe not this year, but at least two we have high football IQ quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers, one of the best, and then Tyrod Taylor. Something happens to A-Rod, we got Tyrod. We got the rod on rod action. And Tyrod, people don't really know, but Tyrod is super smart. He's very high football IQ. Total opposite of, say, Zach Wilson, who had all the physical talent in the world, but didn't have the football IQ, at least not yet. So that is the good news. When we have all of this going on, we really don't have to worry too much about Nathaniel Hackett. He's going to be a play designer, which he's fine at. That's no problem for him. He's been designing plays for many, many years. He's very good at it. And then Aaron Rodgers or Tyrod Taylor is going to make it right at the line of scrimmage. Why? Because they can do so. They have the mental horsepower. So that's the good news. All of this is very complicated, but you need to have the high football IQ quarterbacks to make it run. It would also be nice if we had some luck as far as injuries were concerned this year on the offense. And so I think what this means is we're going to be all right as long as we got A-Rod or Tyrod running the offense. There you go. West Coast jargon. Next news item. Let's go to Lost in the Sauce. What's this all about? Well, let's see. We got a quote from Michael Nania. They're actual idiots working in NFL front offices, Michael says. Well, why does he say that? Well, they put together some rankings. One of these places put together some rankings, and somebody ranked Sauce Gardner number 3. Number 3. We got a number 3 here for Sauce. A lot of people would say, well, wait a minute. He's got to be top 2. I don't mind that he's 3, but apparently he's a polarizing figure. So one veteran AFC scout said, who else with his length and size can cover like him? He's the best. That's probably general consensus. But another guy says, this is one of the most overrated players in the league. High-ranking NFL personnel evaluator said, you could call holding on him every play. And to that, Nania says there are actual idiots working in NFL front offices. Now, the reason I think that Nania is saying that is, well, number one, you could call holding on any cornerback on every play. You could. They put their hands on you. Just because they put your hands on you doesn't mean it's holding. Number one. But the other thing is, if you're going to do this, you should really put your name on it. Like, why are you anonymous here? If you're gonna slam a guy, put your name on it, right? I'm gonna stay anonymous. I'm gonna slam, because this guy probably works for the Patriots or the Dolphins or the Bills, right? Let's go slam Sauce Gardner. But if I were Robert Saleh, what I would do, I would print out all this stuff anybody ever says about Sauce Gardner, stuff like this. And if you remember back in the day when the first Hard Knocks the Jets were under the Rex Ryan, if you remember the scene with Rex Ryan and LaDainian Tomlinson, remember they were in training camp and Rex Ryan comes in. He goes, hey, LT, I got some reading material for you. And he had printed out all of the articles saying LaDainian Tomlinson was done, cooked career over for LT. He said, "Hey, LT, I printed these out for you, some bedtime reading for you, and put it on his desk. All these, as a motivational tool. And if I was Robert Saleh, I'd be doing the same thing with Sauce Gardner. I would be printing all of this out. I'd be keeping the receipts, and I'd be showing them to Sauce to push him even harder, to be even better. Kind of hard for him to be even better, but he could be. And I'll show you why in a second. But if I were Robert Saleh, I'd be printing all of these out and then having a meeting with Sauce and say, Sauce, we've collected all of these all of these articles from the off season. We thought you might like to read them. Here's some reading material, Mr. Sauce. And see how that does. Not that he needs motivating. I mean, the guy's he's hella motivated already, but hey, push him a little bit. But let's see, is there any validity to what they're saying? And is there any way for Mr. Sauce to improve, perhaps? Well, let's take a look. So one of the things that like to look at is the Habak score for people. This is a creation of, wish this thing would go there. Okay. This is a creation of Match Quarters and Field Vision, The Art of X. This is Coach Cody Alexander. If you've seen him on X, I would highly recommend checking them out. They have good data. They created this score called the Habak score. What it tries to do is put a player's performance into context. And so I like the fact that it has context. And you can see here, it has Sauce at number 10. So that's even worse. So wait a minute, what's going on here? We thought Sauce was the best. So what's really happening? Well, don't forget this. So this score now also takes into account run defense down here. Now, as we all know, Sauce is not great against the run. That's not what he does. He's a little bit slight. Now there's an area of legitimate part of his game that he could improve upon for sure. He could get better against the run. And I think in year 1 to year 2, he did get better. And this year, I'm sure he's probably working on it, and he could get even better. So that is something that gets taken into account in the composite rank. Now, normally when you're talking about cornerbacks, you're talking about their coverage ability. That's the main thing that they do. But it's nice if they can also tackle, and help out in that regard. So he can improve there for sure. And I think he knows that. The other thing that he can improve upon, is his interceptions. And we all, I think, know that he needs to take the ball away. He's been talking about that for 2 years. Why doesn't he have more interceptions? Well, number one, people don't throw it his way. So it's hard to intercept it if they don't throw it your way. But he's had opportunities. He dropped a few. But he needs to do that more. And this rating takes into account heavily turnovers. So when you intercept it or you force a fumble, that your Habak score will go up significantly, because that's the best thing you can do. You can turn over the other team, right? So it tries to quantify that. And in Sauce's case, he hasn't, produced a lot of turnovers the first 2 years. That's one thing he has not done. The other thing this tries to do, and if you look at this, it's kind of instructive about how we play defense. So I really like this right here. In cover 1 and quarters, he's ranked 2nd and 3rd, and he's number 1 in man and number 21 in zone. So cover 1 and quarters are zone, but they turn into man eventually. But nonetheless, cover 1 and quarters is what we play. For the most part, the Jets are playing cover 1 and quarters. We play a little bit of cover 2. We play a little bit of cover 3 and very little cover 2. But it's mostly quarters or man, or just straight up man. And these days, there's combinations of man and zone where sometimes the cornerbacks are in man and then the safeties will be in zone, or So there's combos and match, and there's man match and all this stuff going on. But this could be something that, again, Saleh should print this out and say, Sauce, look, they got you 10th on this one. And we need you to improve upon your cover 2 and cover 3, even though we don't call those much. Because here he's ranked second overall in cover 1 and third overall in quarters. And those are what we play. But he's ranked 111th in cover 2, which we hardly ever play. And 35th in cover 3. So you could say, hey man, you got to get better. Now the best stat on this whole thing though is right here. And you could argue with the weighting. So they weight certain things just like any model. They have to have certain weights to give you the result of the model. But there's one stat on here that tells you just how good, other than being number one. So number one in the whole league in man is Sauce. But this stat here means first downs or touchdowns, 10%. A good number that you want to shoot for is 20% for this stat. So 10% is amazing. it's otherworldly. This guy doesn't give up any touchdowns or first downs, basically. And 10% is unheard of. So it's all in how you measure it. But certainly you can see right on here, you can see where he can improve. So I think this is a pretty decent data set to look at. You can obviously see where Sauce is strong and where he needs to improve. He needs to improve basically three things. He needs to improve his run defense, which is his tackling. And I think he knows that. He needs to improve in his zone coverage, which probably is less important. But then the most important thing, he needs to take the ball away. He needs to intercept the ball. And I think we all know that. He knows that. He's been hearing that for 2.5, 3 years already. And if he does those things, well, then you're going to have basically the number one. I mean, you're going to have the number one, undisputed number one cornerback in all of football if he's able to do those things. All right, next news item. Let's go to our map here. O-line comparisons. Let's talk about the O-line. Got some pancakes on here. Hope you're in the mood for breakfast because we're serving pancakes all day. Offensive line, 2024 Offensive Line Almanac by Brandon Thorne. I recommend Trench Warfare on Substack. I would recommend if you're interested in offensive line. I think Brandon Thorne is one of the best. All right, so let's see what this says. We're going to go division by division. This is a little bigger. We're going to go division by division and take a look at experience level, combined age, total draft capital, and so forth. All right, experience level. Where does our experience level rank? Well, we rank 4th, so we got a lot of experience on our team. Nice thing about that is, and you could say, well, that also means you're old. We got a bunch of old people like Tyre, and they're going to get injured. True. We have Tyron, we have Morgan Moses. And maybe that means they're going to be injured. But the nice thing is that a couple of our backups, specifically Fashanu and Carter Warren, well, they're young guys. Max Mitchell, you want to throw him in there. They're the young guys, and they're the backups. So we do have some youth in the backup area. So that's good. And then experience for the starters. But combined age, we're the 28th youngest. So there you go. We got a lot of experience, a lot of age, but we got young backups. Draft capital. How has Joe Douglas compared in terms of draft capital over the years? 11th highest. So, Joe Douglas is really trying to address this offensive line. Didn't work out with Mackay, obviously, and unfortunately. But, I mean, we've spent the most draft capital of anybody in the AFC East. So we've tried to use our high picks. And hopefully Fashanu works out. Total weight, who's the heaviest? So we're the 11th heaviest offensive line. 1,595 pounds. Athletics. Okay, we may be heavy, but how athletic are we? Well, we're not that athletic, but Joe Tipman, who's one of our more athletic guys, um, he had an incomplete RAS. RAS is the relative athletic score that all the players get coming in out of the draft. Uh, so we're 24th, but one of our more athletic people, Joe Tipman, had an incomplete RAS. So that may be weighing our RAS score down a bit. Weight adjusted RAS, 19th best. Offensive line coaches. Then they have breakout units. They don't consider us having a breakout unit. But interestingly enough, the Steelers, look at this. They've completely remade their offensive line. And if they get their quarterback play to a decent spot this year, then I think they're going to be all right because they've completely remade this line. Broderick Jones, who we wanted to draft, Sayamalu, he was a guy from the Eagles, Zach Frazier, one of the top centers this year. And then they also picked a tackle this year, Troy Fatano. You could say, well, these guys are young. You know, they may not be great their first year. And then James Daniels, sort of okay guard. And so that's one thing you could say. Jones, Frazier, and Fatanu may not be great right away because sometimes offensive linemen take a while to develop, which is true. And you can see the Rams even have remade their line. They were kind of falling apart with age, and they remade theirs. Strongest, most powerful player, obviously for us, Tyron Smith. Bills, Deion Dawkins, Teron Armstead, and Michael Owenu. Highest paid units, well, we're going to do pretty good there. So for the investment we have made draft capital-wise, we're not paying anybody. This is because Tyron Smith, I mean, you got to wonder how this factors in because Tyron Smith is heavily incentive-laden deal. Hopefully he gets all those incentives because that means he's playing, and that's what we want. Any other nuggets? Best contract value. Tyron Smith. Smith's coming off an all-pro season. Unit's best player, top 5 left tackle in the league. Even with obvious durability concerns, this is an outstanding contract. Good job, Joe Douglas. Most represented. No, that's not important. Parting thoughts. Any parting thoughts for the Jets? The Jets have the best ratio of 2024 cap hit to experience in the NFL. Their unit ranks 30th in cost and 4th in combined starts. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So that's the offensive line almanac by Brandon Thorne. I highly recommend Brandon's work. Nobody knows offensive line as well as Brandon. All right, let's go to the next news item. This week's community tab. This week's community tab. This will be the community tab of this very YouTube channel. This week in the community tab. Let's see what we got going on here. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is that this channel has a community tab. Here it is right here. And I post on here stuff. It's kind of like X or Twitter, but YouTube doesn't really promote it that much. And so people don't really pay attention to it. So I like to take things I find, throw them up here, things that aren't worth the video, but might be interesting. And we just talked about Brandon Thorne. So here he is again. He had his rankings for defensive line in the NFL for 2024. So because you know offensive line, you should probably know something about defensive line. And Brandon Thorne certainly does. So he had rankings that he does for one of the publications he writes for. So where did the Jets defensive line shake out? Well, guess what? He had us at numero uno. If this will load. We could take a look at it. But he had us at actually number one. So you could worry about our defensive line because we lost Bryce Huff and we lost John Franklin Myers. But even with those losses, Brandon Thorne says we have the best in the whole league. It says, despite losing two quality rushers in Bryce Huff and John Franklin Myers to free agency, well, Franklin Myers was traded, but why quibble? The team has several younger, talented players in the pipeline, primed for expanded roles such as former first-round picks Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald IV, and inside-outside threat Michael Clemens. Johnson finished with a respectable 56 pressures last season, including a pressure quality ratio of 0.78, which, for context, was in the neighborhood of Rashawn Gary, Khalil Mack, and Danielle Hunter. Danielle, the real deal Hunter. So our Jermaine Johnson had a pressure quality ratio. One of the things that Brandon Thorne does is he says, it's one thing if you pressure the quarterback if nobody blocks you and you just run in and pressure the quarterback. And pretty much anybody could do that. They forget to block you. You just run in. That's a pressure. Or you sack the quarterback like that. That's a sack. But it's not a high quality sack in terms of what you did to get it. It's important. It's good that you did it. But is it really high quality? I mean, nobody blocked you. You just ran in there. Anybody could have done it. So he tries to come up with a way to analyze the film and realize, really, is that the same as if you were double teamed and you beat a double team and got a sack? It's probably not the same. But on the stat sheet, it just looks the same, one sack. So he tries to do these quality stats, and he has a pressure quality ratio for pressures. And he says Jermaine Johnson was in the neighborhood of Rashawn Gary, Khalil Mack, and Danielle Hunter, who are really good, as we all know. So that's good news for Jermaine, and hopefully he can continue doing that this year, and that's the point. Perhaps the biggest key towards unlocking this unit's potential is with McDonald, and I think that's true, a second-year former first-rounder who saw less than 100 pass rush snaps last year and will be counted on to produce as the unit's top rotational edge rusher this season. I think that what happened with Huff and Franklin Myers tells us the Jets are high on McDonald, and they should know about defense, and they should know about defensive line. The team also added one of the most proficient sack artists in the league with Hassan Reddick to help replace Huff's production. With elite interior rusher Quinnen Williams spearheading the unit and massive resources allocated to the position, the Jets are in a good spot to sustain high-level play up front in 2024. Best defensive line in football. Even with the losses, even though we have Lakey Fotu, who knows how he's going to do, and Javon Kinlaw, who knows, not listed here. But we got Javon Kinlaw, who knows, Lakey Fotu, who knows. But even with that, we got so many good guys. We're ranked numero uno by one of these experts. Keep in mind, PFF also ranked our linebacker core numero uno, and they also ranked our defensive backfield numero uno. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Hard to do better than number one. All right, let's go back to the community tab and see what else has been posted there, if this will ever load up. But it's also, now I do think we're going to have some issues with our defensive tackles. I don't think we're going to be particularly great against the run, per se. But you can't have everything. Sometimes I do polls on here, like if you prefer to get your content directly through your ear holes, there's now a podcast site for that. And put in a plug for the podcast. There also is a podcast. The podcast also appears on YouTube, but if you want to go to your podcast site and get a podcast, you can. Look for the Frankie from Flatbush show. Now let's take a look at this chart here. So this is by Football Insights. Now, I think they're using NFL Fast R data from PFF and assembled via R programming. And what they're doing here is they take a look at a combination of how good are you against the pass, that's on the y-axis, and how good are you against the run. And then they plot those things onto a graph. So the better you are against the run, you'll be over here. If you're bad against the run, you'll be over here. If you're good against the pass, you'll be over here. If you're bad against the pass, you'll be over here. So where you want to be is up here. This would be the goal. You want to be really good at both. You'll be in this area. So do we have anybody over here? Do we have anybody over here? We do. We do. Quinton Williams, one of the best. Here's Aaron Donald, by the way. Going to the Hall of Fame, no longer in the league. But we got Quinton and Dexter Lawrence, two of the best when you combine both pass rush and run stopping. Quinton Williams, Dexter Lawrence, right up there. Good news. Would be great if we had another one, but you know, you look at these people, they're pretty well distributed throughout the league. It's hard to get two on the same team. Would have liked to have gotten Sheldon Rankins or Quentin Jefferson back, but we didn't. And then you look at the people over here. You know, there's a couple of Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins are going to be in trouble maybe with our defensive line. You know, one of their guys just retired that they thought was going to help replace some of their injured guys. Shaq Barrett retired. They might be in some trouble defensively. So all these type of things, you know, will be posted on the community tab. So this is really just a plug to check that out occasionally. Here's a video by Matt Harmon. Garrett Wilson is ready to be a superstar receiver. Good news. Not that we didn't know that. But if you don't know who Matt Harmon is, so similar to Brandon Thorne's the expert on offensive line and to a certain extent defensive line. He's the go-to guru for that. If you want to have a guru, if you have a guru system for wide receivers, the guru for wide receivers is Matt Harmon. He's the guy. He charts every wide receiver. He charts them coming out of college. He charts them when they're in the pros. He does all this charting. He watches the film. He puts it together, and he does a comparison, historical comparison, who runs the best routes against zone, man, everything, what type of route you're running. Nobody knows wide receivers more than Matt Harmon. I find it hard to believe that there's somebody who knows more. And he's got a video out. Garrett Wilson ready to be a superstar receiver, which we already knew. But nice to have the experts confirming. PFF Sam Monson also has our defensive line as number one in the NFL. And things like this. This is Mike Clay's roster analysis. Has us at number one overall. So all sorts of things happening on the Frankie from Flatbush community tab. Check it out sometime. All right, next news item. Back to our agenda here. All right, probably the most exciting news item of the week. The sports stock market. The sports, should we have a stock market of sports? What are you talking about, Frankie? Well, let's take a look. From Huddle Up, Joe Pompliano. Joey Pomps. The company allowing fans to buy stock in their favorite athletes. What's this all about? Well, let's read. A few weeks ago, I was introduced to a new business called Vestable. The company's core idea is not necessarily new, an investment platform that allows fans to buy stock in their favorite athletes. But they have received a lot of media attention, and there seems to be a large number of people, doesn't say how many people, who are rooting for them to succeed. So this is an interesting idea. Let's buy stock in these athletes that we all love and watch every week. Vestable was founded by Parker Graham and Yves Batoba, two former Oklahoma State football players. They frequently discussed why one player might be more successful as a pro and wondered why a marketplace to profit off that knowledge did not exist, and they're trying to build it themselves. All right, so it's extremely tedious, but it's been done in other areas like collectibles and wine where you can invest. in these things. Creating a new platform it's heavily regulated, of course. Then each offering goes through its own individual process, mimicking an IPO to bring the product to market. Here's how it works. Vestibule works directly with the athletes and their reps to onboard them. Terms of the offering are set. For example, Baron Browning selling between 60 and 100,000 shares for $10 per share for 1% of his future earnings. So you get to get a dividend of a sort. Retail and institutional investors, retail, that's you and me. And institutional investors, that's BlackRock and so forth, can then purchase shares in the offering and receive dividend checks based on the on-field earnings. Failure to pay is mitigated. Okay, so this sounds pretty good, right? Let's invest in our favorite players. Let's instead of having arguments on X, we could just invest and see who's got the best portfolio at the end of at the end of 10 years, and we'll know who made the right choices. And they say Baron Browning's the perfect person for us. Da 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 da. Think of Vestibule as a marketplace. So this sounds pretty good to me, and I think it's interesting to think of this as part of the financialization of everything trend. The financialization of everything trend we have seen over the last few years. I think that is really an interesting one, because there was a thought that people put out there, like that came from, where did it come from? The World Economic Forum or something, like, you will own nothing and be happy. And the idea of that was sort of like, you will rent everything. You'll rent your apartment. You'll rent your music, like these streaming services. You'll stream your movies. You don't have to own anything. You'll rent everything and be happy. You'll own nothing and be happy, they said. But that's kind of ridiculous. What if we turn that on its head and we said, you will own everything and flourish? What if you owned a part of everything instead of owning nothing? Well, how would this work? And how is it working? Well, here are the guys, these two. They're the owners, the guy on the left here, the guy on the right, and the guy in the middle is a Fox Business guy, talking about it. So they were able to get on Fox Business. They're getting some hype. That's good. Now, here's the problem. Here's the company. And as you can see, the current offerings are a little, shall we say, slight. So basically, Baron Browning, they got him signed up. And that's about it. I don't know how we're going to have a market with one. This is like a stock market with one stock. We got to get more people on here. What's going on with these two? But imagine if you had like Sauce Gardner on here and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. I mean, Jet fans would be going crazy. Wouldn't you buy stock in Garrett Wilson? Wouldn't you buy stock in Sauce Gardner? Wouldn't you buy stock in Breece Hall and Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald and so forth? I think you would. So why are these guys not able to get more players interested in this? Because I think this idea of ownership is something that's appealing to a lot of players. Now, let's examine a couple other things involving this. Look at this one. MLB's newest power couple, Skeens Dunn, make waves beyond diamond. They don't say how they're making waves beyond the diamond, but these two people are interesting. Like, let's say you could buy stock in Paul Skeens or Olivia Dunn. Now, for those who don't know, this is a baseball pitcher with an excellent mustache, and he throws about 1,000 miles an hour. So he plays for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he throws over 100 miles an hour, and he's come into the league, and he's taken it by storm, and he's a big story. And now apparently he's dating Olivia Dunn, this lady, and she is an LSU gymnast. And you say, well, what's the big deal there? Well, she's also a major influencer. She makes tons of money on NIL deals, which ties into this, because now a lot of these college kids are making their money in college before they even get to the pros. So they get to the pros and they're already financially savvy. They've already made millions of dollars. They've already been taxed on that. And they want to figure out perhaps a different way to uh, maintain their capital and do their philanthropy and do things that they want to do. They want different ownership options. And so imagine being able to buy stock in Mr. Skeens here or Miss Dunn here. Now, she's a gymnast, and I guess a lot of people follow her on social media. And I don't know what she's going to do after the NIL is over. She has an estimated NIL valuation of $3.9 million. That's and so you might say, how the heck is she getting 3.9 million like I did? So I asked the internet, why is Olivia Dunn famous? Social media fame. Initially, she posted videos of her gymnastics, but later started posting videos of other areas of her life as well. She's the most followed NCAA athlete on social media, with more than 7 million followers on TikTok, 4 million on Instagram. So I guess that's valuable. I don't really get it. But nonetheless, she makes $4 million a year for posting pictures, I guess, of herself. And so what if you could buy stock in that? And what if you wanted to be an LLC? What? Caleb Williams, what's going on here? Bears GM addresses reports of Caleb Williams' strange, it says here, strange contract requests. When you're a stranger, well, why? What's so strange about it? Well, look at this. Speaking of ownership, you will own everything and flourish, the Frankie quote. Williams apparently asked to be paid through an LLC. How about that? Rather than directly from the team, as well as if he could receive his salary via a forgivable loan. The NFL shut down both avenues when the Bears asked about it. So they said, no, you can't do that. But think about it. I mean, Caleb Williams is one of these first people coming through now to the NFL where he's made tons of money already through NIL deals in college. This guy's a multimillionaire coming into the league. Already got his money. Already understands how all that works. And now he's asking, hey, can I be an LLC? Why don't I turn myself into Caleb Williams LLC? Why do I got to be an employee? And the reason you want to do that is because the tax laws in America are favor corporations rather than employees. And the reason for that is they want to incentivize people to create companies that can employ people and provide a service. So all of the tax laws are much more favorable if you're a corporation. And if you receive the money as a corporation, you can depreciate it. You can do all these tax loopholes and whatnot. So the headline of this says strange. I don't think it's strange. I think it's very smart of Caleb Williams to ask. Now they said no, and he signed it. But I think more of these kids coming in are going to try to explore this because, again, they've been exposed to big money through NIL deals now. They're going to be coming through and they're going to be saying, wait a minute, if I'm just an employee, I'm going to lose half my money to the government. I don't want to do that. I'd rather keep it and do philanthropy with it or do whatever with it. So can I become an LLC? And then if they did become an LLC, think about it. Let's say Caleb Williams did become an LLC. Now he could participate investable and you invest in Caleb Williams LLC, right? It ties right into this, right? So, Baron Browning could become Baron Browning LLC, Sauce Gardner LLC. And now it's basically the same as any other company that you invest in. For example, this article appears on Substack. Huddle Up is Joe Pompliano's Substack. Well, guess what? I, Frankie, am an investor in Substack. Not a big investor, But I'm an investor because Substack's a company, and I think they're going to do well. And I think eventually at some point they're going to go public, and I'm going to get some money out of it. Right? And I wanted to support them because I think it's cool what they're doing. So it's a company you can, they put it up for investment. You can invest in it. And I invested in Substack, full disclosure. So why not do the same with athletes? Now, what about this? Speaking of investments, what about the Green Bay Packers? Green Bay Packers are the only publicly owned team that provides the only publicly owned team, right? So because of that, they put out their finances so we can learn about the NFL finances through the Green Bay Packers because they're not owned by one person. They're owned by the shareholders. Green Bay Packers. So let's read about this. The Green Bay Packers have one of the most unique ownership structures in professional sports. Rather than a single billionaire or dozens of limited partners controlling the cap table, the franchise in the NFL's smallest market is owned by its fans. 537,460 shareholders who have purchased 5.1 million shares to be exact. Now, full disclosure, I am one of these shareholders. So I'm a shareholder in the Green Bay Packers. Why not? They put it up for sale in 2021 and they put out some shares. They said you could buy some. And roughly 175,000 fans, including me, participated in the last stock offering, with each share selling for $300. Now, it's not like you're buying a share in a publicly traded company. They're not publicly traded. They're not on the stock market. So there's no market, for price finding. The shares come with a certificate to hang on the wall. Yep. The chance to purchase shareholder-only merchandise. Yep. And an invite to shareholder meetings at Lambeau Field. Yep. And you get to vote also on the management, certain management things. But it's not like this is a real security. The shares don't appreciate in value, can't be traded, pay no dividend, and offer no real say in team operations. True. But that's because it's not on the market. It's a private, you buy and you hold. Now, the interesting thing is, what if some big billionaire came along and said, you know what? I want to buy the Packers. Well, guess what? They would have to buy out all of these shareholders. 537,000 of us would have to be bought out. So you would have to give us a premium. And so they might value the Green Bay Packers at $20 billion, billion with a B. And then, if each share would be 5.1 million divided by 20 billion. Then we would get paid out based on how many shares we have. That would be nice. But what if some of the players said, we want to put together a group to buy the Packers? Again, this is all about ownership. Shouldn't the players participate more in the ownership of these clubs? I mean, they're the ones generating the revenue. They talk about how much revenue. Here's the revenue for the Packers, for example. And you can see up. Well, who's generating this revenue? It's mostly the players. So I think a lot of the players who are, again, coming from the NIL era now, and the NIL idea is, well, in college athletics, these players are generating billions of dollars for the universities. So shouldn't they be compensated for this? And the answer recently has been, yeah, and let's do it through NIL deals. Well, at some point, these players are going to go, wait a minute. Well, hold on a second. We're generating all this revenue for the teams, and we don't have a ownership stake. We can't get a stake in the ownership. We got to be treated as employees. That's no good. We want to be owners. And one way they could do it is to create some sort of market. I mean, could be a deal where the players become owners of the teams and then the fans become owners of the players. How about that? You will own everything and you will flourish. That's the Frankie saying, forget about you will own nothing and be happy. You will own everything and flourish. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. All right. So that's, I think that's it as far as the news is concerned. I think that is it as far as the news is concerned. All right. So that's a lot of news. That's a lot of news. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Do a little Q&A in case there's any questions in the chat. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And we can stay caffeinated for the day. We can stay caffeinated for the day. All right. No further questions. Well, feel free to check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to come back next week, Sunday at 10 a.m. Next week we'll have some we'll probably have some news from training camp and so forth and so on. So check that out, and I'll probably be chopping up this show into clips for the week. So if you want to see an abbreviated version of some of these topics, check out those clips. And otherwise, I will see you next week.